When an actor becomes Jesus, the invisible war behind the spotlight. Have you ever heard of an ordinary man stepping into the role of Jesus and suddenly finding himself crushed by fear, pain, and unseen forces? What if the struggles on set were not just stage nerves, but signs of a greater battle between light and darkness? And what if even the skies responded, with storms and lightning striking the cross? Was it mere coincidence, or a terrifying sign that heaven and hell were watching? An actor is supposed to memorize lines, follow the director, and deliver a believable performance. But what happens when the role is not just any role, but Jesus Christ himself? Jonathan Roumie, the man chosen to embody Christ in the global phenomenon The Chosen, never imagined what he was stepping into. Millions of viewers have been moved by his performance. His eyes radiated compassion, his voice carried authority, his gestures revealed tenderness. Audiences saw the Jesus they longed to meet. But what they did not see was the unseen weight pressing on Roumie's soul. Behind the bright lights and polished cameras was a hidden battlefield. A struggle that no scriptwriter could invent. A spiritual war that seemed to unleash itself every time he opened his mouth to speak the words of Christ. Roumie himself admitted, "I felt completely lost in that moment. I sensed pain flooding into my body. My ears rang. My heart pounded out of rhythm. I thought it was anxiety. But the longer it went on, the more I realized this was not ordinary fear. It was something darker. The audience only witnesses the final product, breathtaking cinematography, carefully arranged miracles, and a performance that touches the soul. But for the actor standing in the sandals of Jesus, the cost was far greater than anyone realized. Playing Jesus is not a simple performance. It is a calling. It is a weight. It is a holy fire that consumes and sometimes scars the vessel chosen to carry it. First attacks, panic and resistance. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The set was ready. Hundreds of extras stood silently, waiting for the cameras to roll. The sun was shining, the microphones captured every sound, the director gave the signal. Jonathan walked to the center, dressed in a simple robe, the man everyone expected to embody Jesus Christ. Then it happened. Without warning, a stabbing pain pierced through his ear. His heart began to race uncontrollably. His hands trembled. His breath caught in his chest. Panic gripped him like an iron fist. Roumie later recalled, "It was as if something was pressing against me, trying to choke the very words before they left my mouth. I could not breathe. My body shook. My mind screamed. I whispered to the director, 'Can we stop? Please, something is wrong.' The director, Dallas Jenkins, was stunned. This was not stage fright. Roumie had already filmed countless scenes with power and authenticity. But this was different. This was sudden, violent, overwhelming. They stepped aside. Jonathan confessed quietly, "I feel crushed. The moment I begin to speak his words, I feel unworthy. I feel resistance. Not just nerves, something heavier, something darker. The symptoms became most severe during the most emotional scenes, moments of forgiveness, grace, or miracles. The stronger the message of Christ, the stronger the pressure Jonathan felt. It was as though an invisible enemy was doing everything possible to silence the words of the gospel on his lips. Roumie admitted, "When I heard my own voice speaking Jesus' words, I thought, I should not be here. This feels wrong. Who am I to speak them?" The set, filled with cameras, crew, and actors, suddenly became a place of invisible warfare. Every line of scripture, every gesture of mercy seemed to draw fire from forces no one else could see. And yet he pressed on. He told himself, maybe this is part of the role. Maybe this is the cost of stepping into his story. But deep inside, he knew this was more than acting. The Sermon on the Mount, Resistance Revealed. The Sermon on the Mount was supposed to be one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series. Hundreds of extras had gathered, clothed in first-century garments. The hills stretched out like a natural amphitheater. The cameras were perfectly positioned. For weeks, everyone had anticipated this moment. Jonathan stood at the center, robed as Jesus, gazing at the crowd. Every eye was fixed on him. Every microphone captured his breath. Every camera recorded his movement. Then once again, the attack came. A sharp, unexplained pain cut through his ear. His chest tightened. His heartbeat skyrocketed with no warning. His hands shook. His vision blurred. His body trembled under an invisible weight. Roumie remembered. It felt like the air itself turned heavy. My body was failing me. My soul was under assault. I thought, this isn't stage fright. This is something trying to stop me from speaking his words. The extras stood silently, waiting for him to speak. The crew held their breath. But Jonathan could barely stand. He turned to Dallas Jenkins, whispering desperately, "Please, can we slow down? Something is wrong." Dallas, puzzled but discerning, looked into Jonathan's eyes and saw it. His lead actor was not battling stage nerves. He was battling something deeper. A force that rose up precisely when the words of Jesus were about to be spoken aloud. Roumie said softly, "When I hear myself speaking these words, I feel unworthy. I feel like I don't belong here. As if I'm trespassing on holy ground." The director made the call. "Stop!" The entire set froze. Extras lowered their heads. Crew members exchanged anxious glances. For a moment, silence fell. Not the silence of a paused film shoot, but the silence of something sacred pressing in. Jonathan later explained, it wasn't about forgetting lines. It wasn't about losing focus. It was resistance. Spiritual resistance. The kind that rises when truth is about to be proclaimed. He realized that speaking the words of Jesus carried a cost. Every phrase of the gospel echoed not only in the ears of the extras and the millions who would later watch, but also in the unseen realm. Roumie reflected, when you speak the words of Christ, the enemy listens. From that day, both Jonathan and Dallas knew. The Chosen was not just a TV show. It had become a battleground. The Last Supper, pain, fear, and the power of prayer. If the Sermon on the Mount revealed the first signs of battle, the filming of The Last Supper drove the struggle even deeper. The set was dimly lit, filled with candles and shadows. The table was prepared with bread and wine. The disciples sat around Jesus, waiting for him to speak words that would echo through eternity. "This is my body. This is my blood." But before the cameras rolled, Jonathan felt something stir within him again. A strange pressure built behind his eyes. His ear throbbed with a stabbing pain. His chest tightened, his heartbeat raced until he gasped for air. Roumie recalled, it came suddenly. A crushing weight. My body betrayed me. My heart pounded so violently I thought I might collapse. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't sickness. It wasn't fatigue. It was as if something was trying to break me apart from the inside. For 2 weeks of filming The Last Supper, the symptoms haunted him. At times, he could barely sit in the makeup chair. At other moments, he trembled so badly he thought he would not make it onto the set. But this time, Jonathan refused to fight alone. He asked for help. He reached out to his spiritual director, a man who had walked with him in faith. He sent a desperate text. "Please pray. Something is wrong. I can't explain it." The reply came almost instantly. "I am praying the rosary for you right now." And within 15 minutes, the pain subsided. The heartbeat slowed. The panic melted away. Peace returned. Roumie whispered to himself, "This is not stress. This is war. A spiritual war." He had discovered something profound. When darkness pressed hardest, prayer became the shield. The rosary, the divine mercy chaplet, the mass, the sacrament of confession, these were no longer rituals. They were weapons. From that moment, Jonathan began to weave prayer into every part of his preparation. Before makeup, before rehearsals, before speaking a single line. He prayed not just for strength, but for protection. I realized I was not just acting, he later explained. I was standing in a space where heaven and hell collide, and the only way to stand was through prayer. The Last Supper scenes were completed. But the memory of those silent battles stayed with him. Behind every line of scripture spoken on set was the hidden cry of his heart. Lord, help me. Lord, protect me. Lord, make me worthy. The crucifixion. When heaven and earth trembled. The crucifixion scenes were the most anticipated and the most feared moments of the entire production. Everything about them carried a weight that went beyond cinema. The cross had been raised. The nails were ready. The entire cast and crew stood in reverent silence. Jonathan was lifted onto the cross. The air felt heavy. Dark clouds began to gather in the sky, though no storm had been predicted. Then, without warning, the heavens roared. A bolt of lightning tore through the sky and struck the cross. The set exploded with gasps and cries. Crew members froze. Extras shielded their faces. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. This was no special effect. It was no trick of the camera. It was real. A flash of raw power from the heavens striking the very symbol of Christ's sacrifice. Jonathan later shared, "We all stood there in silence. No one spoke. No one dared. It felt like heaven and hell both knew what we were doing, and neither remained silent." The moment was terrifying, yet undeniable. It echoed a story from 2 decades earlier, when actor Jim Caviezel filmed The Passion of the Christ. He too had been struck by lightning while hanging on the cross. He too had endured dislocated shoulders, pneumonia, and a near-fatal experience. Caviezel later said, "I knew if I died in that moment, I would go to heaven." Roumie reflected on the parallel. It happened to Jim. It happened to us. This is not coincidence. This is participation. When you step into Christ's suffering, you taste a fragment of his cross. For the cast and crew of The Chosen, the lightning strike was a sobering reminder. They were not just recreating history. They were entering holy ground. Every scene carried consequences in the unseen world. Every word spoken echoed far beyond the cameras. From that day on, no one on set doubted it. Portraying Jesus was not entertainment. It was warfare. And the cross was still shaking the earth. The aftermath, a life transformed by the role. The lightning strike was not the end. It was a turning point. From that day forward, Jonathan's life on and off the set was forever altered. The weight of the role followed him home. Long after the camera stopped rolling, he carried it. At times, he sat alone in his room, weeping without knowing why. At other times, he felt waves of sorrow and love crash into his heart with no explanation. Roumie confessed, "There were nights I could not sleep, days I could not eat. I felt completely spent, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And yet in the middle of that exhaustion, something holy pressed closer. He began to live differently. Prayer was no longer optional, it became breath. He prayed the rosary daily. He turned to the Divine Mercy Chaplet. He fasted not just for discipline, but for protection. He went to confession with greater urgency. He attended daily Mass whenever possible. I realized that if I was going to step into Christ's footsteps, even for a moment, I had to cling to him. I could not do this alone. I had to surrender. The role of Jesus was no longer a performance. It became a personal pilgrimage. Roumie was not only acting as Christ, he was being drawn closer to Christ in ways he had never imagined. But that closeness came at a cost. I felt unworthy, he admitted. Every time I spoke his words while hundreds of eyes stared at me, I thought, what am I doing here? Why me? I am flawed. I am broken. And yet, God chose me for this role. That reality both crushed me and carried me. The attacks did not stop. But Jonathan learned to fight back, not with anger, not with fear, but with prayer. He wielded spiritual weapons. He carried the rosary on set. He prayed before every scene. He whispered, "Lord, let it be you, not me." And in those moments, the battle shifted. Roumie explained, "The more I surrendered, the more I felt the Spirit guiding me. Even when the panic came, even when the darkness pressed, prayer pierced it." Grace was stronger. He no longer saw himself as merely an actor. He saw himself as an instrument, a vessel, a servant caught between the demands of art and the demands of heaven. "I was not chosen to live comfortably," he reflected. "I was chosen to carry a mission, and missions always demand sacrifice." The cost was great. He lost sleep. He lost comfort. He lost his sense of normalcy. But in return, he gained something infinitely greater: intimacy with Christ. And that intimacy was the only thing that gave meaning to the pain fruits of the battle, lives transformed. As the seasons of The Chosen continued, the struggles did not vanish. The production faced delays. Finances were stretched. Cast members fell sick. And Jonathan himself continued to wrestle with invisible resistance. But the fruits began to appear, fruits that no storm could erase. Letters poured in from around the world. Viewers shared how their marriages had been restored after years of brokenness. Addicts testified that they were set free from chains that bound them for decades. Families began praying together again. Skeptics returned to faith. Roumie read their words with tears in his eyes. "Every time I hear these stories, I realize my suffering was not wasted. My pain had meaning. My exhaustion had purpose. If even one person found Christ through this work, then every battle was worth it." Millions were not only watching a show, they were encountering a living Christ through the fragile vessel of a man who surrendered. Dallas Jenkins, the director, admitted, "We set out to make a TV series, but it became something more. It became a movement, and movements always stir both heaven and hell." Jonathan understood this deeply. The enemy doesn't waste energy on the lost. He attacks those walking in the light. And if the light shines through us, even imperfectly, it will always draw resistance. But resistance is proof that the light is real. By the time the series reached the Holy Week episodes, Jonathan was exhausted. The filming of Palm Sunday, the Last Supper, Gethsemane, and the crucifixion demanded everything from him. Yet in his weakness, grace overflowed. "I realized that my role was not to be perfect," he said. "My role was to let Christ shine through me, to disappear so that he could be seen." And in that surrender, lives continued to change. Conclusion. The story of Jonathan Roumie is not just about an actor. It is about the cost of stepping into Christ's story. It is about the reality that following Jesus always involves a cross. Portraying Christ on screen turned out to be more than acting. It became a battlefield, a vocation, a sharing in the mystery of his suffering. And yet, through every tear, every sleepless night, every lightning strike, the light of the gospel broke through. Jonathan himself said it best, "I hope people don't just see me. I hope they see him. Because that is the only reason I am here." Call to action. If this story touched your heart, don't leave it here. Subscribe to our channel and walk with us in the next journeys of faith. Share this video so the light of the gospel can reach even more souls. And write a comment below. How has Jesus touched your life? Your story may be the spark of faith for someone else.